Hello. So I just read Dagon by H.P. Lovecraft. Pretty good. Few minor complaints. Overall, I'd say the book itself, or the short story in this case, is 7 out of 10. 7 out of 10 read. Worthwhile given it's like 6 pages, right? It's not like a heavy read at all. It's like a sit down while you're drinking a coffee or something and just burn through it. But yet again with these short stories, my complaint is the pacing. Uh that and in this case it feels like the medium or the perspective changes. If I go to the okay, it's written from a perspective of somebody writing it, right? So that sounds weird, but the story is told from the perspective of a narrator, right? Writing. I'll read the opening for you to explain what I mean. It starts with the line, "I am writing this under an appreciable mental strain." So it's being written, but the end of the short story ends with like reality, and it's not necessarily the best shift. So we get to the end, and he finishes writing the story, right? Then he says, "The end is near. I hear a noise at the door," and then he talks about it, but he starts writing like the window, which part of the story is he's gonna kill himself, right? So there's gonna be a warning, I believe, at the beginning of the video, but he he goes through this, and it's this whole story, and he talks about it, and he's writing it out as it's the past, but then out of nowhere it snaps into the present. I just feel like this could have been better, like it could have been transitioned nicer than the story's finished and then he goes back to writing about his current situation because of the context that it sounds like he is talking aloud at the very end. That's it. That's my big complaint, is that was a jarring transition. Beyond that, um the descriptions of the monolith were kind of disinteresting. Like I wasn't really engaged, and the eldritch horror in this case is hardly even mentioned. It's brushed upon. The terror is real, and you fear, you feel the narrator's fear, right? So you're very engaged with his plight. You understand his mental state. Like he talks about being a morphine addict. He talks about like the terror of what he experienced, how it's completely destroyed his life. He can't go back. He won't. He's gonna, like he can't live without the morphine because of the terrors he's seen, and he can't explain it to you in the true level of fear that he's going through. Like he says, "Do not think, from my slavery to morphine, that I am a weakling or a degenerate." So, like he has an opinion of himself, and he's like, "I'm more than just an addict. I've just suffered greatly, and this is how I cope. This is how I survive." The problem is, when he describes the suffering, there's a lot of leaving it to the imagination, and I feel like in this case, Lovecraft goes too far into relying on that. In previous works, he describes the creature with more detail than what I've read here, or not in previous works necessarily, but in works I have read previously, right? Like in the Call of Cthulhu, he describes Cthulhu in more detail, and this is part of the Cthulhu mythos, so I feel like it should have more to it than what it is. If I can find, I'm just clicking through like my pages right now. I'm trying to find the exact description of the creature. He talks about, so he initially gets captured on a boat, right? He steals the ship and he escapes with food and water, and wakes up one day having struck a new landmass that appears to have risen from the ocean. It's covered in like dead fish and everything, and it's sludge because it has to dry out and become a like proper island. And he explores it during the day, and he later remarks that this was foolish. He gets to a mountain essentially that he can't climb in the heat. He climbs it at night, And that's when he sees the creature. Where is that, though? This is the monolith. Where is that? Okay. He describes the pictures of like humanoids on the monolith itself as being pre-Neanderthal, but having the ability to worship gods and have created these structures, which most of the time we assume, at least, and I think it's known to science at this point, that really didn't happen before. Like Neanderthal, like Aztec is closer to us than Neanderthals are, right? Like, so that was weird. He talks about like a pre-civilized society that was civilized, but then compares them to Neanderthals or worse. So, bit of an odd comparison to draw. Okay. He talks about how that was a glimpse of the past. Suddenly, okay, here it is. Then suddenly I saw it, with only a slight churning to mark its rise to the surface. The thing slid into view above the dark waters. Vast, Polyphemus-like, and loathsome, it darted like a stupendous monster of nightmares to the monolith, about which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, the while it bowed its hideous head and gave vent to certain measured sounds. I think I went mad then. So it's kind of just like not very descriptive, to such a degree that it took me out of it. Because if you're describing this like utterly terrifying encounter, it'll stick with you at least a little bit more than, oh, it was kind of slimy and it's got scaly arms and it worshipped a monolith. You'd be like, here is like a little more about it, right? So I don't know, that just felt unrealistic. Like, as humans, we tend to pay close attention to these things and describe them more accurately. Not like the most close attention. Like, if you hear stories of like horror survivors, like horrific experience survivors, right? Shark attacks and stuff, they don't describe it in accurate detail always. Or kidnap victims, they don't always describe their kidnappers accurately. But they get the gist of it, usually. And in this case, there's not really a gist of it, which was rather irritating. Beyond that, like I said, that transition at the end, he talks about how he's gonna fling himself from a window once he runs out of morphine, essentially. And then I hear a noise at the door as of some immense slippery body lumbering against it. It shall not find me. And then he goes, God, that hand! The window, the window. Fade to black, essentially. So he gets found by this creature, or by the pre-humans that worshipped it, and chooses to fling himself out a window into the street below from the window. Which, cool, if that's how you want to end the story, that's how you want to end the story. But it was jarring, and it wasn't really a good conclusion because of that. The transition work could be much better, and the descriptions of the monster could be much better. Beyond that, very atmospheric. It flowed well. The thought process of our narrator was fairly understandable. Like, it felt realistic from the sense of an addict who was struggling because of past experience, all the way down to the justification of that addiction through past experiences, right? So, a good read, but only a 7 out of 10. I think this is the lowest I've rated a thing that was written by H.P. Lovecraft, unfortunately. And it's purely down to his transitions and descriptions in this text are weaker than in other ones that I have read. That being said, still good. Still good, still enjoyable, just not his best. Thanks for watching.